Archaeodeath, Death and Memory, Past and Present, with Professor Howard Williams.
So now a quick open the floor. If anybody has any questions before we let this gentleman get some sleep, because I'm not sure if you're aware, but it is not 3 o'clock in the afternoon in England right now.
I'm all right. I've been sleeping most of the day because I had my Moderna booster jab yesterday, so
Oof,
I've been feeling like I'm
that's what
horror.
I
I feel
had.
horrible, but
The
but
rough one.
I'm here. I'm here for this. I'm here for this. Give me your questions.
Because
Or
if
not.
not, I'm sure I have other ones. You know what I say though? I turn the where did the Viking horns thing? Ah, that's a good one. You do that.
Easy
I'm
one.
gonna run off.
Yeah,
Where did the Viking
Wagnerian
horns?
opera. It wasn't Wagner himself. It was his costume designer. I can't remember which for the Ring Cycle opera, and basically, but it didn't come from. That's another myth because actually, a lot of barbarians were represented with winged and horned helmets through 17th, 18th century representations. But in terms of popular understandings of exclusively the Vikings having horned helmets, it's really an invention of Wagnerian opera costumes in the late 19th century that has perpetuated through in popular culture. So a lot of people say, oh, if you think the Vikings had horned helmets, you're wrong. Um, Actually, there is some other that I can make. I guess usual because I'm wishy-washy. I'm an academic. There is evidence of horned headdresses we have from artistic representations from the Vendel period, the immediate pre-Viking period and the Vendel period. But I won't go into that. But for simple terms, horned helmets are a modern invention we associate with the Vikings, and there's no archaeological direct evidence that they had them. But do I go around, getting back to our earlier conversation, do I go around shouting at anyone that represents a Viking as wearing horned helmets? No, because it's a way in. It's a fun thing. If you're wearing a plastic horned helmet at a festival, I'm not going to go out and go, excuse me, do you realise that's totally historically inaccurate? No, because it's made of plastic. That's the first thing. And secondly, it's a bit of fun. But no, of course, we don't think the Vikings had horned helmets, but it's a piece of modern paraphernalia that associates Vikings with barbarity, and it comes from Wagnerian opera in the 19th century.
Oh, Howard, we have a good one here from Bixels. How would you suggest to talk to supremacists about Vikings on this app specifically? She also then prefaced, send them to you. Well, you can send them to me too.
Well,
I love to fight.
well, I mean, I don't have much experience of talking to people who are already indoctrinated into these extremist groups. Most of my problem as an academic is trying to deal with other academics who think they've got the solution. um, so I can't really answer. All I would say is that with everybody, I try to show mutual respect until they prove it otherwise. If anyone asks me a question, I'll answer it in good faith until I realise that what they're trying to do is either set me up or trying to manipulate what I say. So I
Right.
try to give everyone the same respect for at least one exchange and assume they're not trying to sustain some kind of bigotry and hate. And if I see they're doing that, I shut it down. And I've been recently accused by other academics of being in some kind of clique with white supremacists myself, simply because I disagreed with them on a public social media app, and somehow that was manipulated because I disagreed with them on social media quite robustly, and then this crazy guy used his YouTube channel to denounce me. Um,
Yeah.
um, Somehow that was manipulated to say I am in league with him. It's shocking how people will
Both
manipulate things
both
within
Bixels and I,
academia.
both Bixels and I,
So
who are both Jewish women, have been accused of anti-Semitism for not
yeah,
supporting the Israeli government. It is ridiculous,
yes.
but we do some good. Here's another one. Yeah, Donald,
So I've
horrible
got to be
history.
careful. My point is, by concluding that point, can I just say I feel I've got to be very careful about how I'm misquoted, but I try to keep an open door for at least one conversation before
Yeah. It's also important because I do deal with a lot of those. Some people are just uneducated. Some
yeah.
people are knowledgeably ignorant, and no amount of anything you will say to them will ever change their narrative. They've invented it for a reason. It fits
Yeah.
their story. It fits them. So I always do the same thing. I always give people like the benefit of maybe you don't know, and then when they show me that they in fact do know, that's usually the end of it. So here we also have horrible histories. That's where you learned about the Viking helmets. I loved horrible histories. As a child, I loved the books. I don't know that I've ever watched the shows, but they had one on the Middle Ages. There was a horrible histories book in the Middle Ages, and they did the bubonic plague and a bunch of other stuff. And I remember being a child and correcting in a social studies class, which is our version of history. I think I was 11 at the time, and we were doing the Middle Ages, and the teacher was talking about the Dark Ages, and I don't even remember what the myth was, but it was again rooted in supremacy and ignorance. And I, at 11 years old, stood up and went, well, actually, which we've said we shouldn't do. I do love horrible histories. And then in here we have other questions that are quite good. Somebody here did say that they knew somebody whose grandfather was a Viking. I'm very sorry to say you did not. He may have been Norse or Danish,
Yeah.
but he was not a Viking. We have not had those for a very long, long time.
Yeah, I think it's best. I would agree with people about countering that kind of thing. Yeah.
What is the first known evidence of Vikings existing, or do you mean Norse culture? Because those would be two different things. So what is the first known Viking existence?
Well, I mean, we're talking about the early Iron Age, really. I mean, the whole point is that the Viking Age is a kind of arbitrary sort of slab of Scandinavian history time from the 11th to 8th to 11th century. But we've got actually, the irony is, all of the new archaeological evidence is showing that the phenomenon we call the Viking Age is starting in the period that historians and archaeologists call the Merovingian or Vendel period. In other words, the 7th, 8th centuries. So actually, these terms, and you know, there was a Norwegian scholar 40 years ago, everyone scoffed at, Bjorn Møre, who actually said, we're going to find evidence that the Vikings, Viking raids and Viking expansion and and trading was going to be 8th century, not 9th century. Let's not believe 793 Lindisfarne as the first raid. Let's push it back. And he hasn't been proved 100% right, but we're now getting evidence from Estonia, from Norway, the west coast of Norway, and elsewhere, including southwest Denmark, that the Viking phenomenon of trading and raiding was actually a whole 2 generations earlier, starting about 750, 740, 750. So you know what? Raiding was a thing way back, into the Roman period. We've got evidence of archaeological evidence of what we call booty sacrifices, which sounds something dodgy, but it actually is when you capture and kill all your enemy, you chuck all their weapons into a bog. We've got them back from the 2nd and 3rd century AD, showing that people were roving around raiding back in the Roman period. But really, the Viking Age is now being pushed back at least 50, 60, 70 years earlier to the 740s, 750s. So that's exciting.
What's your favorite site that you've been to and why?
Favorite archaeological site?
Yes.
Okay, there's so many that I love, and there's so many I haven't been to, and I haven't traveled that much. I have to go for one I dug, which is not very well known, which is Skamby in Sweden, where I excavated a Viking boat grave. And it's lovely, beautiful. Because I spent literally 12 weeks of my summer in 2005 daily on that site. I've got a particular affinity to it. It's basically a ridge which has Viking period burials in it, never dug before, and got permission to do a scientific rigorous excavation at the site. I published it in a journal with my colleague Dr. Martin Rundqvist, who's a Swedish archaeologist, and we found a boat grave. We found a Viking boat grave. It was very badly damaged, but the best thing we found of all the things that was the bones had gone, so there was no skeletons.
Right.
But we found the amber gaming pieces. So from the Hafnatal game that the Vikings played. So we found 23 beautiful domed amber gaming pieces. They look like little chocolates. In fact, I assure you, I didn't eat any, but I was tempted. If anyone's seen The Mandalorian, it's like Grogu going to spheres. I sort of went, oh, but I didn't eat any. But they looked almost edible. They were so beautifully carved, made of Baltic amber. So you held them up to the light and they glowed. Beautiful. They were gaming pieces from the 9th century, and we found those. So that's my favourite site because I dug it.
Okay, so we also have questions. Have you ever been to sites in Denmark or Ireland?
I have been to both. I haven't exhaustively gone around Ireland, but I've gone to some of the key sites like Monasterboice, if my Irish friend here knows Monasterboice, and I've been to some of the west coast down to the Dingle Peninsula. In terms of Denmark, I've been to I've been Copenhagen. I've been to Jelling. Did a conference at Jelling. I did a Viking conference and talked with some of the great scholars there. And yeah, I've been around. Yeah, conferences and visiting sites, but never enough. Never enough.
So, what is your top on the list to still see?
Well, I suppose top to still see. I really need to go back in my Viking interests, I need to go to the Northern Isles of Scotland. I haven't been to Orkney,
Mm.
I confess, or Shetland, and I must go there. I follow this wonderful creator who is a Shetlander, and she does word of the day in Shetland dialect. And I want to go to Shetland. I want to go to Orkney. Yeah, I want to go to within these islands, but not really these islands because they are sort of in the North Atlantic. I want to go and explore those. Lots of great archaeology.
Those are very
And
high on my
Galway,
list,
yeah.
actually. Yeah, very high on my list of places I want to go as well for the same reasons.
No,
Ooh,
I mean,
what's your favorite artifact that you've seen or dug? I guess
oh,
I guess he just talked about it. It was he tried to eat it.
I did. I shouldn't have admitted that. That's the type of thing that will go. I'll never be forgotten that I tried to eat something. No, but it's just that you sort of felt sort of go, oh, that's really. What other? I can think of another great artifact I found. Oh yeah, do you know what? Do you want to hear a real braggy artifact I found? I'm
Yes.
the only person. Those of you who want to go and Google search this, if you don't know the site, go and do it because this is my one brag I use occasionally, and I do it for you guys as a special brag. Is when I was a student in 1991, I was just a young man. I was digging at a very famous archaeological site called Sutton Hoo,
Ooh,
and in
really?
1991, this was the major excavations at a site that famously was they discovered in 1939 the Mound
Okay.
1 ship burial you can see in the British Museum with the helmet, right? So I didn't find that. Yeah, Grogu Williams is going to be my nickname. Sorry, I'm just saying someone's just said that. In 1939, they found the famous burial. They did a Netflix film called The Dig. You must go and watch. But in 1991, I was the only person as a student to find gold and garnet um, in the excavation. So I was the first person since Basil Brown and the Charles Phillips team to find gold and garnet at Sutton Hoo, and I did it in 1991 as a student, and we think it was a bit of a golden garnet little bead, exquisitely made from probably Sri Lankan garnet. Talk about long distance contacts. Sri
Right.
Lankan garnet mixed with probably melted down Roman gold, crafted in the early 7th century, probably put in one of the burial mounds excavated by Basil Brown in 1938, and we think he missed it. And I found it in 1991 that he missed in his spoil heap from 1938. And I'm never going to be able to trump that. I'm never going to be able to get anything better than that. So I'm not into treasure because treasure isn't, it's the stories and the context, as I keep saying.
Mm.
But in terms of individual objects, that has to be my favorite object ever found. And it's finally published in the big academic book from 2005. And I did a little TikTok about it back in the day somewhere you can go and watch. I did a braggy TikTok. No one saw it again because of but I did a sort of, I found this. But it's a wonderful thing to find I saw the trowel knocked it and I picked it up and I said, uh, Gigi, his name was Gigi Signorelli. He was an Italian archaeologist who was supervisor, and he looked like a mixture of I don't know what did he look like. He was a lovely guy, but he looked like a bit like a Johnny Depp character. He looked like a pirate on site because he was Italian, but we had this big scarf pulling back his head, so he looked like a bit rum-addled. He had that look, and he had a massive beard. And he came up to me and goes, "You're a lucky man. Never have I found gold." In that kind of voice, that sort of Mediterranean voice. And it's sort of like, well, I'll never forget those words because he was genuinely in awe that I'd found an object of gold. And I said, "What is
Right.
this? I don't understand. It looks like," and he went, "It is gold." So it's like sort of a Hollywood film moment,
El Dorado
but
style.
yeah, it was like, oh. So yeah, that was lovely. But
Wow,
I've never found
that is
gold
not even
since.
a humble brag. That's a brag. I would give my left leg to go there, let alone
So
find anything. My goodness
so
gracious.
if Ray Fiennes played Basil Brown in the film, who's going to play me? I don't know. Obviously, Tom Hardy would play me.
Obviously,
Obviously,
naturally.
no, but no.
Okay. Um, Arguably, what do you think? What do you think has been? This is a hard one to say because it's so nuanced. But what do you think has been the most important find in recent history? Like, what do you think has changed the mold a little bit?
Oh, no, I should have prepared myself better for this.
Ugh, I'm just slapping you with all this. You know what? I'm gonna give you a minute
Gee,
and a half.
you're tough. You're tough.
I
You
need to go
started
to the
off nice with
washroom.
me, and now 2 hours in. You're really you're giving me the tough grilling now. Okay, the most amazing, world changing find in archaeology. I mean, there's coming year on year. Every find, it's amazing. I mean, let's just think of the last year alone in terms of Viking archaeology. I mean, all right, I'll tell you one cool thing: the Valkyrie pendant, they mold that they found at Reba.
Yeah.
And there's a really cool, I mean, just this isn't actually, I'm just making one up because there just could be one. So Soren Simbeck and Sarah Croix and her team at Reba have published this. It's a mold, and they reconstructed from this tiny mold what these were the molds they actually made, the bronze figurines that we found metal detecting finds of these warrior women across southern Scandinavia as little pendants. And whether they represent gods or whether they represent real warrior women or not, we don't know. But they found the mold that made one. So they actually found the production site. And that is a choice. That is a choice little find. So I loved the idea. And they had to reconstruct it from broken bits of clay and work out that this is how they made those pendants. So I'll give you that one.
For everybody else who's in here, what does that find tell the archaeological world about society then?
Well, it shows the importance of these trading sites, and that these trading sites were places not just trade, but they were producing the stuff that was going around the whole Viking world. So they were making the oval brooches that all the reenactors dressed in female gender garb will wear, these pairs of big tortoise brooches or oval brooches, either over their collar or over their breast. There's a whole debate about where they were positioned, but let's not get into that. Or, those objects were being made in these trading sites, but also a lot of these figurines, a lot of these objects were being produced in these big trading sites. So they were craft centers. Yeah. So I suppose that's why it's cool. And because it is real evidence of Viking warrior women, but it's not necessarily evidence of women actually wielding the weapons, but of stylized representation of that idea was actually circulated. People had lots of these objects of women wielding weapons, whether they were real or not. They had the objects, showing that, whether it's representing gods, heroes, heroines, take your pick. We don't know.
Okay, here's another one. What is your favorite weapon of the time? What is your favorite weapon of the Viking era specifically, as far as military advancement goes, and why do you like that one?
Okay. There's a number of different ones I could pick for this one. I will go with the Mammon axe, the famous. It's in all the books, and because people can find that one. There's other ones I like, but they're so niche no one would care if I mentioned them. But the Mammon axe with this yellow, silver inlaid, decorated axe handle, and it was clearly a ceremonial object for a high status official or local chief in the late 10th century, buried in a chamber grave at the site called Mammon. That's what it's called, the Mammon Axe. And it's a cavalry grave. It's a man with a horse and weapons and so on. Or we think it's a man. It could be a woman now. We need to do DNA on it. But it's got a really cool axe. So if anyone wants to Google Mammon Axe, it'll blow your mind if you don't know it. And you probably do know it, but you didn't know what it was called. But that's favorite, and not because it technically does anything. It's an axe. All axes are. Everyone had an axe in the Viking Age, for everything. But they are very, very cool.
Okay, so somebody else said they're interested in the ones you don't hear about or see often. So you're right. When we see depictions of Vikings in anything, even Norse, Scandinavian, anything, we see a shield. We see like the shield maidens. We see a lot of axe action.
Can I give you another one then that you need to know about? Can I give you another quick one? You need to check out, if anyone's watching this, and Yarm, the Yarm helmet, YARM. And the simple story here's, up until last year, we only had one Viking helmet from the whole Viking world. There's some pre-Viking ones, but not from Jernmbu in Norway. And it was founded in the 1940s, and it's in all the books, and it's got this kind of no horns. It's got this sort of looks like cat-like eye effect, and you'll see it reconstructed. But last year we had confirmed an antiquarian find, I think it was found in the 60s or 50s, at Yarm in North Yorkshire, is proven now by metallurgical analysis to be Viking Age. And why it's great is it's shit. It looks rubbish. And all the reenactors were going, oh, it can't be a Viking, it can't be a real, it must be someone did this to make it look like a Viking helmet, cheap on the cheap in the 50s, as a joke. It's not Viking. It's too ugly. And all the reenactors, no reenactor, or very few reenactors or living history bods, have reconstructed the Yarm helmet because they think it looks dumb and crude. But the point is, it's the kind of helmet that most warriors or most would have had access to, if any helmet at all. And so actually, check out pictures of the Yarm helmet, because it blows the lid on this aesthetic that all Vikings were. There's two ways people go. Either they're all shaggy, knit-infested ruffians, or they're all or manicured, manicured, very pretty boys, type look with a comb and of course somewhere in between. But this helmet is crap. It just looks like it's been bashed together at a very local level, and I think that's why it's so cool. It's just a bit rubbish.
How do you spell it? It's
Why?
YARM.
Yeah, I think it's Yarm. It's
Yeah.
the Yarm helmet, but it's not. Actually, I don't think it's that bad at all. But what I'm saying is that our aesthetics are driven by what we already find.
Well, and
Hey, it's Bjorn's
a lot of
here.
our
Yeah.
image in our head about the Viking period, a lot of it is romanticized. At
Yes.
Victorian times, the Victorians were actually really big on romanticizing the Viking period as well. But the
Yeah.
Victorians were big on romanticizing everything. But a lot of like the image of the modern Vikings with the flowing hair and the large fur cloaks and that was very much suppressed Victorian people having urges they couldn't deal with. We see a lot of
Someone's
that
found it.
actually.
They're saying they love the helmet. Good. I'm glad someone's found it. Yeah. No, it's interesting. Well, we do know that the Franks were really cool at sword blade making, and that Frankish sword makers' blades had names on them, such as
Mm.
Ulfbert, and we find those blades with the name written on them. And we don't know if it was one swordsman called smith called Ulfbert, or it became just a brand name like Adidas or Nike or something.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's not either of those extremes. It's somewhere in between. But Frankish sword production, and these blades have been found in Ireland, they've been found in Russia, and clearly the Norse had their own bog iron, they were making their own weapons, but they really valued Frankish blades, and they really liked that. And some of the descriptions the Arabs have of the Norsemen, they have Frankish blades, they describe them explicitly, they know they're not Norse blades, so there's this prestige of having really good blades, because it really made the difference. Because if your weapon shatters, or you can simply, you're not a particularly good swordsman, but you can just, you can parry 2 extra blows than your opponent. Their sword is messed up. You win that particular combat. So I think these things did make a difference, and people were valuing the blades and long distance travel. And then I think they were breaking up swords a lot, breaking them up, rebuilding them, refashioning them like old cars, because the best bits, the reliable bits, they wanted to keep. So they didn't just throw them out. So I think hilts were changed, blades were changed. I think there was a constant valuing of old weapons, and we see that in the later sagas and Beowulf, the Anglo-Saxon poem. This idea of
Yes.
old blades being reliable ones. Yeah.
Yes.
And we have
That makes
Sidonius Apollinaris in the 5th century talking about the Visigoths having serpentine blades because they're folding the iron with the carbonized iron, so that it basically have this kind of pattern weld going down the make. That's what Bierman's talking about. Yeah.
Yes, the
What's really
progress stuff.
interesting, what's really interesting about some of these blades is a study by Dr. Sue Brunning. She's done a video on YouTube about the Sutton Hoo sword, but she did her doctoral thesis looking at wear patterns on the hilt of the sword, so you can actually work out which was the front side of the sword, and sometimes the sidedness so you can actually work out whether the man had it on his belt, was a left-hander or a right-hander, and how it would be positioned. And of course, the sword at Sutton Hoo is oddly in the grave on the right-hand side of where the body is postulated to be, suggesting they would draw it with the left. Oh, Biowen's already got there, lefty. And so this hints that actually this was a very distinctive mode of combat. Fighting a lefty would be really difficult. I think there's a number of other things in that grave that suggest this person was not just a warrior, but has very distinctive fighting style. But I think it's interesting. You can find out those personal details about how these weapons were valued and kept and endured. Yeah, very interesting stuff.
Here
But
too,
that's not
somebody had
Viking. That's
asked,
pre-Viking. But that's still the
wasn't
same
there a
thing.
Viking sword found in Canada recently? I'm actually not sure. I do know that when
There's
they
a lot
first
of
found Vinland, the way that they proved it was actually the Vikings there long before they uncovered the roofs of the longhouses because they had been buried. So long before that, it was actually it was a pin, it was a cloak pin, is what they had found.
yeah. They
Which
found that there have been some, and this is again a colonial problem, is that a lot of the desperation to find Vikings in the New World goes back to a 19th century romance, and there's some indigenous burials that were misattributed just because everyone wanted them. I suppose my point would be that these are stories that, and they're contradictory in terms of the number of expeditions, and they're contradictory between the Saga of the Greenlanders and the Saga of Eric the Red. and they are oral histories they've written down, but they are, in general spirit of terms, they've now been archaeologically proven with Lonsa Meadows. And I think while people haven't been able to prove the Point Rosy site, that there was a TV program, space archaeologist Dr. Sarah Parchak and Dan Snow, TV historian, did attempt to find a site, and it proved to be unlikely to be an actual Norse settlement. But there probably are other sites. The Lonsa Meadow site doesn't look like it was the final site. It was a staging post on journeys further south. So we will probably find other archaeological evidence. We've got other finds. Indeed, the finds from Lonsa Meadows show that the people who lived there had gone further south in terms of the objects they had there. But it's going to be really difficult to see. And I suppose my only, as an archaeologist, my only problem is that this fascination with just finding evidence of the Europeans without considering the indigenous stories of those landscapes has a enduring problem with it. In my view, yes, look for evidence of the Norse settlement, but don't make it, it's very colonial to sort of just be looking only for that. There's lots of exciting archaeological finds from the American northeast coast that can be explored, many exciting stories that the archaeology is telling us. And again I still get it over the years. Students come across the pond from America and say, oh, it's great to be in Britain because it's actually an old country, whereas we don't have any history. I go, apart from the huge rich archaeological and oral history evidence of indigenous people. I mean, maybe you don't have history because you see yourself as European, but that's your problem. But so I still see that. And while it's nice to have people think that Chester and Wales and England are historic places, then so is everywhere in North America too. It's just we've got to get away from seeing the indigenous evidence as something other. I think we've always got to keep an open mind and to evaluate suggestions and think, not to get too rooted in, assuming.
Oh, Howard, has there been anything that you've come across while on a site that you've been surprised about, like something that has surprised you?
Literally every excavation, every week, every day. You can't tell what you're going to find. You can't predict it. Bloody Romans, everything I dig, even if it's a late medieval site, the Romans always turn up. They're everywhere. They're like a virus, like something like Hugo Weaving out of the Matrix. They're like a virus, Mr. Anderson. Every archaeological site in the island of Britain has Roman pottery or Roman material somewhere, and it really drives me mad. So that's not surprising there. Let me answer the question properly. Things that really surprise me. I'm sorry, I can't think of anything specifically to add. Maybe I'm just getting tired, but I can certainly say that every excavation is a lottery. So a horrible term to use, but you can't predict exactly what's going to be going to come up. Even localized preservation conditions between a couple of feet away from each other can be really different. Right. Don't try and trigger me about Romans not existing. I see that comment. I see you trying to. Yes, I think we can rest assured
that's another one we won't get into. They well and truly existed. Everybody knows that, except for one specific person. Somebody else went. What are your thoughts about the excavation of the parking lot which found the king? Because that was
Richard III. Yeah, that was an unexpected one, wasn't it? That was a very unexpected one. When I first started my blog in 2013, I really annoyed University of Leicester archaeologists by doing a blog saying why we shouldn't have dug up Richard III, just as a controversial polemic point. Because my point was genuinely, we've got some really amazing excavations finding thousands and thousands of medieval skeletal remains that are telling us the story of medieval people, their diseases, their burial rites, everything from life to death. And I'm sick and tired of royal. There's still a real, I call it royal necrophilia. There is a real weird, talk about other crazy things. People who love Richard III are at another level. They're not Rome didn't exist level of unhinged. They're not ancient aliens level of unhinged, but they are special. It's like people that follow, C-list royals, and I don't know. There's something really weird. It's like a celebrity death culture.
Yeah,
it's celebrity. Yeah. Yeah, it's like and it's cult-like, yes, and that project was really good. I wasn't critical of the archaeologists, but my blog so annoyed the press office of the University of Leicester that they approached all of the team, all the big-name archaeologists involved in it, to denounce me and to come back, and they all said, "No, Howard's right. it's a weird, royal necrophilia thing, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I wasn't saying their work was rubbish. I was saying that the way the university manipulated it and made it a public story fitted into the worst kind of patriotic nonsense. I mean, they had when they reburied Richard III's remains, they crying out loud, gave him a guard of honor with
They had a state funeral, didn't
15th
they? Like,
century
the whole thing.
knights, and
Yeah.
it was weird. It was like it was, and I was teaching the next day, and I got all the students to watch it. I said, when did we last see this? We last saw this, and they didn't know because students never watch TV or anything. I said, last time we saw a state funeral like this was Margaret Thatcher, and before that, the Queen Mother, and before that, Lady Di. And I said, obviously, opinions differ about those individual characters, and I won't say anything disparaging about them, but one could say this was just deeply odd and English. And the crowds were not representative. Leicester happens to be one of our most multicultural cities. And well, let's just say the people in the audience rocking up to see this failed English medieval monarch's burial were not representative of that composition, shall we say?
Somebody just
It was
said
very
here how the peasants lived is more interesting. Anyways, this is
yeah
another
yeah.
fascination. So
Yeah, I think that's that romanticizing of the past, which we can do without. And that's why I didn't object to the project. I thought it was a great project, showcased archaeology for Leicester and for schools and lots of public engagement. They did some great work. But the number of Canadians, if I can say, rocking up claiming to be descendants of Richard III was deeply worrying. And or not just Canadians, but I'm just picking on that because I'm talking to you. But it drew out a whole strain of weirdness.
yeah, to me, but even to me, it seemed very bizarre. Like, oh, it's cool we finally found him because that was a bit weird. It's hilarious that he was
I mean, it
under a
was
parking
totally
lot in
luck.
Leicester.
Yeah.
Like that to me, that's what I was hung up on. I'm like, that's where he was the whole time. The whole time.
Well, they're
Under
looking.
the parking lot in Leicester.
I want none of it. I think, if you didn't guess, as a British archaeologist, we dig up the dead a lot. It's not the same as in North America, but that doesn't mean we're not respectful. We, and chasing dead celebrities for their bodies is really
Well,
sketchy. If you want
you
my
just hit the
opinion.
nail on the head there because I think this is like the original celebrity culture. I've heard people argue that like
Yeah.
the gods were. No, that's different. That's spirituality. The glorifying of royalty, as it were, through Europe was the first example of celebrity culture. And oddly enough, it is continuing. It's still a thing. And it's bizarre to me. Somebody in here asked, and this is very off topic, but I'm going to address
Someone's
it
from Reading. I have to say, I see someone from Reading. Well, the comments are turning into a Ricky Gervais sketch here. I'm from Woking and Burfield. My God, like a Winnersh. I'm from Reading, Caversham. Anyway, but yes, it's all good area. It's all my local origin place. You see, international app, talking to people in Canada, people from Wokingham.
If you want to see discussions like this anymore, either of us, I do recommend that you go follow Howard. Feel free to send us messages, and I'm sure I speak for myself when I say I'd be more than happy to hop on another one.
Yay! Well, that'd be good. That'd be good fun. Yeah, I'm sure there's more things we can chat because it's I'm learning as I go. Both with the app and meeting new people. It's good fun. And
the questions are coming in at a rapid pace, so I'm just going to ask you guys to save the rest because we're probably going to have to call this soon. But what was your favorite part of this little chit chat today?
Mine, I suppose I liked ranting about Richard III, but earlier on I liked ranting about other academics and their inability to see the opportunities. I think that was an important point. I want people to remind people of. I think I don't get it right all the time, but I think this was an example which has been very constructive because while I did get a few bigots having a go at me, the volume of comments who appreciated my input on that issue, and this is a follow-up to that post, has been just overwhelming. So it's a rare instance where people have seen my videos, but I think I really appreciate that. I'm not saying I pitched it exactly right, but I'm going to try and I've learned from that. So that's the point I wanted to get across at
Somebody
the end.
says, I've literally learned more in this than the 12 years of school. That is fair. And I did see Bixels, who's one of our moderators. So actually, everybody thank the moderators. They did a great job.
Yes, they've been brilliant.
She did comment and wanted to say thank you to everybody in the comments for being so reasonable, respectful.
Yeah, you've been good.
We only had to kick out maybe 2 people. Other than that, it's been an absolute treat having all of you guys in here. It's great.
Oh, that's wonderful.
30 over here. Yeah,
You didn't
Chris
kick
says
me out, which is the
136.
main thing.
Follow Archaeodeath on WordPress, or you'll never learn.